I'm making this claim because the mountains in Peru are suffering. The glaciers are melting. We haven't caused this problem. It's big companies like RWE. Now they must take responsibility. These are the words of Saul Luciano Yuya, a farmer, mountain guide, and climate activist who lives in the city of Huaraz in the Peruvian Andes. Perched above the city is Lake Palcachocha, and perched above the lake are rapidly retreating glaciers. As the glaciers melt, the threat of avalanches increases. Avalanches crashing down into the lake could cause its waters to come rushing down, wiping out the homes in Huaraz. Luciana Yuya and the NGO German Watch first brought a lawsuit against the German energy company RWE in 2015. At that time, it was hard to prove that emissions from the company's coal power plants impacted warming in the Andes. But that same year, the World Weather Attribution Project began to uncover the science needed to attribute climate warming to emissions from specific sources. Today, we can attribute 0.47% of climate warming to the energy giant RWE. Luciano Yuya and his neighbors are asking a German court to rule that RWE should pay 0.47% of the costs of a dam to alleviate the risk of flooding. Although the amount is only $20,000 US, RWE has spent hundreds of thousands in legal fees to avoid paying. In so doing, RWE has caused an international uproar over the rights of indigenous farmers in the global south, pitted against energy corporations in the global north. The Luciana Yuya RWE lawsuit is just one of 853 climate legal cases brought against governments and corporations in 54 countries and 21 international courts as of December 2023. The Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University in New York has divided the cases into 7 areas: constitutional and human rights, greenwashing and climate washing, climate capture and sequestration, environmental and social corporate governance or ESG backlash, non-compliance with climate commitments, nuisance and climate damages, and climate change in international and regional courts. Let's go through each one briefly. Human rights. About a third of climate cases are based on human rights claims. Examples include tribes forced to move away from their ancestral territory and youth claiming the right to a stable climate. Greenwashing. The 2022 FIFA Soccer World Cup in Qatar was carbon neutral, or so claimed FIFA, in a blatant attempt at greenwashing or misleading the public. The Swiss Fair Advertising Commission admonished FIFA, reminding them that stringent factual standards apply when advertising carbon neutrality. Other greenwashing claims against the airlines, Nike, and energy companies assert that companies are promulgating misleading statements about how carbon offsets, sustainable aviation fuel, and their products are supporting zero carbon goals. Carbon capture, removal, and sequestration. Suits against pipelines built to transport CO2 and against rampant logging fit under carbon capture, removal, and sequestration, given the dubious claims of carbon dioxide capture projects in which the CO2 is injected into the soil to force out methane, thus exacerbating total emissions. We may see more cases in this area. Environmental and social corporate governance, ESG, backlash. ESG backlash cases are brought by conservative groups against governments and companies who are trying to do the right thing for our climate. In the US, cases have been brought against states and local governments banning gas stoves in new buildings, government pension plans trying to divest from fossil fuels, and even companies being able to consider climate change in their risk analyses for investments. Non-compliance with climate commitments. Lots of countries signed the Paris agreements, but it may take legal action to force them to achieve their emissions targets. In Colombia, for example, a lawsuit forced the government to comply with its nationally determined contributions. Nuisance and climate damages. A damage case comes from Brazil, where the Supreme Court ruled that sea level rise had caused the destruction of bars and restaurants along the beach, that the damage was foreseeable, and that damages from greenhouse gas emitters were warranted. Climate change in international and regional courts. Academics, lawyers, and groups such as Stop Ecocide International, World Council of Churches, and Climate Council are helping the International Criminal Court determine how to bring charges against politicians, organized crime, and fossil fuel companies that have been aware for at least 50 years of the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, legal claims are not always successful, but that hasn't stopped citizens groups from trying and persisting. More and more cases are emerging and more are successful. In France, in a case called L'Affaire du siècle, or the case of the century, over 2 million citizens signed a petition claiming that the French government had violated their constitutional right to a healthy environment. In the US, youth ages 5 to 22 took the state of Montana to court for violating their right to a clean environment, which is enshrined in the state's constitution. And in a case called Juliana versus the US, young plaintiffs claimed that the federal government violated their constitutional rights by causing dangerous carbon dioxide buildups. Whether or not the energy giant RWE pays $20,000 to the residents of Juarez for a dam to protect their city, we can expect legal cases to keep coming, perhaps forcing governments and corporations to think twice before ignoring activists and their claims about human and climate rights.